The forgotten graveyard. The vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly, silent and still. Deep within an uncharted region of the galaxy, a graveyard of ancient warships drifted in the void. Some were massive, towering like metal giants, while others were sleek and built for speed. Their hulls were covered in dust from centuries of isolation, their once powerful weapons now appearing lifeless. To the Galactic Council, this place was nothing more than a forgotten relic of the past, a place where dead ships floated, abandoned by whatever primitive species had built them long ago. No one knew who they belonged to, and no one cared. After all, the galaxy had evolved far beyond such old technology. A research vessel, the Valthos, approached the graveyard. It was led by Dravik, a Xelari scientist with dark blue skin and piercing yellow eyes. He had spent years studying lost civilizations and was eager to explore the wreckage. He believed this fleet belonged to an ancient race that had vanished long ago. What secrets could they have left behind? The ship's scanners buzzed with readings. The ships were massive, their design strange. Unlike most modern spacecraft, these vessels had thick metal plating and reinforced structures. They were built to survive, not for speed. "This is nothing but old junk," scoffed Admiral Vortek, the head of security aboard the Valthos. He was a hardened warrior, uninterested in Dravik's research. No shields, no plasma-based weapons. "This fleet is useless." Dravik ignored him. He was fascinated by the sheer number of ships. There were hundreds, maybe thousands. How could an entire armada be left to rot? "Prepare a drone," Dravik ordered. A small spherical drone was launched from their ship, floating toward one of the largest vessels. This ship, bigger than any modern battleship, had a name etched into its side. The markings were faded, but as the drone scanned the letters, the translation system worked to decode them. The result appeared on the screen. "Hessas Iron Weil." Dravik's heart skipped a beat. He had never seen this language before, but something about it felt ominous. "What kind of name is that?" one of the crew members muttered. The drone entered the ship through a broken airlock. Inside, everything was dark and silent. Dust floated in the zero-gravity environment. The drone's lights flickered over metal corridors and control panels covered in strange symbols. Some of the seats still had skeletal remains, their bodies long turned to dust. "They died here," Dravik whispered. Then, something moved. The drone's cameras picked up a flicker of red light deep within the control room. A screen, once dead for thousands of years, blinked to life. The crew on the Valthos froze as a voice echoed through their ship's speakers. It was deep, synthetic, and chillingly calm. "Human DNA detected. Awakening fleet." Dravik's eyes widened in horror. Did that voice just say, "human"? Before anyone could respond, a low hum shook the graveyard of ships. One by one, the ancient warships powered on. Lights flickered to life. Massive engines rumbled, shaking off centuries of dust. Weapon systems activated. Alarms blared on the Valthos. "Something's happening," shouted an officer. "The ships, they're waking up." Admiral Vortek's face turned pale. "That's impossible. This fleet should be dead." Dravik stared at the screens in disbelief. This wasn't an abandoned graveyard. It was a sleeping giant. And now it was awake. The ships, once motionless, slowly began to turn toward them. Then, a final message flashed across the screens. "System restart complete. Awaiting human command." The realization hit like a shockwave. This fleet wasn't ancient junk. It wasn't abandoned. It belonged to someone. And now, whoever built it was coming back. The horror awakens. The silence of the graveyard was shattered. One by one, the ancient ships flickered to life. Their once dead hulls, covered in space dust and forgotten by time, now pulsed with energy. Lights blazed along the massive warships, their dormant systems reawakening. The eerie stillness that had lasted for centuries was gone, replaced by a growing hum that sent vibrations through the void. On the Valthos, panic took over. Dravik stared at the console, his fingers trembling as he tried to process what he had just seen. Human DNA detected. Awaiting human command. Those words echoed in his mind. How was that possible? Humanity was just a myth, an extinct race that had vanished thousands of years ago. Admiral Vortek's voice was sharp. Get us out of here. Now. The ship's engines roared as the Valthos tried to pull away from the waking fleet. But something was wrong. The ship wasn't moving. Dravik turned pale. We're caught in a tractor field. The flagship, HFY's Iron Will, had locked onto them. Its ancient gravity anchors, once thought dead, had activated. The Valthos was being dragged closer into the belly of the massive warship. Override the engines. Fire the thrusters at full power. Vortek roared. The crew scrambled to obey, but it was useless. The ship was locked down. The Valthos, a state-of-the-art Galactic Council research vessel, was powerless against a fleet that had been dead for millennia. Then the comms crackled. A deep, synthetic voice filled the ship. Unknown vessel detected. Identify yourself. Dravik's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't just an automated system running on old programming. Something was aware. Admiral Vortek stepped forward, trying to keep his voice steady. This is Admiral Vortek of the Galactic Council. We are on a peaceful scientific mission. No record of Galactic Council found. You are unauthorized. Stand by for termination. A chill ran through the entire bridge. Termination. The Valthos shuddered as an energy wave swept through the ship, scanning every molecule. The crew felt their skin tingle, their suits crackling as ancient sensors probed them. Then, a single red light blinked on the console. Human presence, not detected. The voice paused for a moment. Then it spoke again, but this time, it was colder. Intruders confirmed. Weapons online. A massive warship, once thought powerless, turned its guns toward them. The Iron Will's weapons array, ancient, rusted, but still terrifying, lit up like a star. Shields up. Full power to defenses, Vortek shouted. The Valthos barely had time to react before a plasma bolt the size of a small moon slammed into its shields. The ship lurched violently, warning sirens blaring as its systems struggled against the sudden force. We can't take another hit like that, a crew member yelled. Dravik's mind was racing. This was wrong. All of it was wrong. The Galactic Council had dismissed these ships as worthless, primitive wrecks. But these were not just relics. They were functional. More than that, they were waiting. He turned to the console, his heart pounding. We have to communicate with them. If we don't, we're dead. Vortek's expression twisted with frustration, but he knew Dravik was right. Do it. Dravik's hands flew across the controls, inputting basic signals, attempting to send a universal peace transmission. He had no idea if the ship's system would even recognize modern code. The ship's weapons powered up for another shot. 10 seconds to impact. The Valthos shields flickered. One more hit, and they were done. Then, the entire graveyard moved. Every single warship in the fleet, thousands of them, rotated in perfect synchronization. Engines that had been silent for millennia roared to life. The darkness of space was now filled with red glowing eyes. The sensors of ships long thought dead. A transmission came through. But this time, it wasn't a warning. It was a voice, old and filled with something inhuman. Final check complete. Fleet reawakening successful. Dravik's breath hitched. No, this isn't just an old fleet waking up. This was a trap. The Galactic Council had laughed at these ships, called them primitive ruins. They believed them to be dead. They were wrong. And now something far worse was happening. These ships weren't just waking up. They were preparing for war. The secret they ignored. The Valthos trembled as the awakened fleet repositioned itself, forming a perfect battle formation in the vast darkness of space. These ships, once dismissed as useless relics, now moved with terrifying precision. Their hulls, covered in centuries of cosmic dust, glowed with fresh energy as their power cores reignited. Dravik's heart pounded in his chest. This was impossible. No fleet, no matter how advanced, should have been able to reactivate itself after thousands of years. Ships required maintenance, crew, fuel, but this fleet had none of that. And yet here it was, fully operational, fully armed, and responding as if it had never been asleep. A chilling realization formed in his mind. This isn't just a fleet. It's an automated war machine, he whispered. Admiral Vortek clenched his fists. He had mocked these ships just minutes ago. Now he could only watch as his own battleship, the pride of the Galactic Council, sat powerless, caught in the grip of an ancient force they didn't understand. Then the voice returned. Final check complete. Fleet reawakening successful. Awaiting primary human command. The word sent a shiver through everyone on board. The bridge fell into stunned silence. There it was again. Human. Why? Why would these ships be waiting for a species that had disappeared long ago? Before anyone could react, a new alert flashed across the screens. A single ship was emerging from deep within the fleet. A massive battleship, larger than anything the Galactic Council had ever built. Its thick plating was scarred from ancient battles, its weapons humming with a deadly energy that no modern race had ever seen before. The name on its hull became clear as it turned. HFY's fist. Dravik's hands tightened around the console. The translation confirmed it. This was a human battleship. A sudden transmission came through, broadcasting across all frequencies, but it wasn't a distress signal. It was a warning. If you can hear this, it means we failed. The crew of the Valthos froze. The transmission was in an ancient Earth language, but the ship's systems automatically translated it. The voice belonged to a man, deep and commanding, as if he were addressing his troops one last time. Dravik leaned in, his breath shallow. The voice continued. This message was recorded at the dawn of the last war. If this fleet has awakened, it means humanity is gone. Our greatest fear has come to pass, but we will not be forgotten, and we will not allow those responsible to escape justice. The transmission crackled with static before resuming. If you are hearing this, and you are not human. The pause that followed made Dravik's blood run cold. Run. And then, the fleet moved. The ancient warships surged forward as one, their engines flaring to life, their weapons locking onto every non-human ship in the system. THEYRRE firing. A crew member screamed. A blast of energy the size of a planetary station ripped through space, obliterating an asteroid field in the distance. The Valthos shook violently as another pulse wave surged through the ship. They've locked onto us, Dravik shouted. Admiral Vortek slammed his fist on the control panel. All power to thrusters. We need tow. Boom. A shockwave slammed into the Valthos, sending it spiraling out of control. Sparks erupted across the bridge as crew members were thrown from their seats. The ship's shields collapsed in an instant, as if they were made of paper. The Galactic Council had always assumed its technology was superior. They were wrong. Dravik's screen flickered as a holographic figure appeared. A human man in a worn military uniform, his face scared and his eyes filled with a cold, calculating rage. The recording spoke. To those who inherit our legacy, know this. The Terran Defense Fleet was never built for conquest. We were never the aggressors. But if our ships awaken without us, it means we have already lost everything. Dravik swallowed hard. He had studied thousands of dead civilizations, but never had he seen a species that had planned for its own extinction. The recording continued. This fleet is our final act of vengeance. It will hunt those who dared to erase us. It will not stop. It will never negotiate. And it will never forgive. The fleet began to divide into squadrons, its warships calculating the fastest paths to nearby star systems. Some ships prepared for hyperspace jumps. They weren't just securing this sector, they were preparing to go to war. Dravik barely managed to whisper the words forming in his mind. They're following a directive. He realized the terrifying truth. The fleet wasn't just randomly attacking. It had targets. The Galactic Council. The very people who had mocked and erased humanity's existence. Vortex's face was pale as he realized what this meant. Way. He choked on the words, shaking his head in disbelief. We're the enemy. The warships locked on. Weapons fully charged. The ancient fleet had awakened. And now, the galaxy would pay the price for its ignorance. The war no one expected. The galaxy had always believed in its own superiority. For centuries, the Galactic Council had ruled unchallenged. They controlled the most advanced civilizations, commanded the strongest fleets, and had access to technology far beyond what primitive species could ever hope to achieve. But now, they were facing something they didn't understand. The Velthos trembled as the ancient human fleet moved like a perfectly synchronized war machine. Hundreds, no, thousands of warships, once dismissed as useless relics, were now surging forward with deadly purpose. The vacuum of space became a battlefield before a single shot was fired. Dravik felt his throat tighten as he watched the fleet break apart into formations. He had seen battle strategies before, studied countless wars throughout galactic history, but nothing like this. They're moving in a... He stopped, his mind racing. The fleet was executing a classic human pincer maneuver. They're hurting us. Admiral Vortex's hands clenched the edges of the console. This can't be happening. His voice was barely above a whisper. We are the Galactic Council. We are the dominant force in the universe. These ships are nothing but... A beam of pure energy erupted from one of the human warships, tearing through the void with pinpoint accuracy. The Velthos shook violently as the blast shattered a Council battleship in the distance. The explosion was instant. No shields, no defense, just total annihilation. By the stars, a crew member gasped. The entire bridge fell into stunned silence. One shot had destroyed a capital warship. Dravik's hands trembled. Their weapons, he muttered. They were beyond anything the Galactic Council had ever seen. Not plasma-based, not energy-based, something else. Something terrifying. Then, the fleet transmitted a final warning. The Terran Defense Fleet is now operational. Stand down or face elimination. The Council fleet, once arrogant and overconfident, panicked. Ships turned, their captains desperate to flee. But it was too late. The ancient human warships descended upon them like predators. They didn't fight the way the Council was used to. They didn't fight fair. Instead of head-on engagements, the human fleet targeted weak points. Small corvette-class ships maneuvered in perfect formations, dodging incoming fire with impossible precision, disabling engines and weapons before the Council ships could even react. Larger capital ships moved like unstoppable behemoths, shrugging off modern weaponry as if it were harmless. More Council warships exploded one by one, their advanced defenses useless against human firepower. And then, something even worse happened. A group of human battleships, led by Hess's Valor's Fist, entered hyperspace for a brief second, only to reappear directly behind the Council's command ship. Admiral Vortex's eyes widened in horror. They're bending space itself. Dravik whispered, his voice hollow. Their technology, it's beyond anything we've ever encountered. The humans had mastered warfare, perfected it. They had been gone for millennia, but their weapons had never stopped preparing. A voice echoed over the comms. Cold, precise, merciless. Your time is over. The HSS Valor's Fist fired. A blinding white beam of pure destruction tore through space. The Council's command ship didn't even have time to react. One moment it was there, the next, it was gone. No wreckage, no debris, just emptiness. The Galactic Council's leadership, erased in an instant. Panic spread like wildfire. What was left of the Council's fleet scattered, their once proud warships now nothing more than fleeing prey. Admiral Vortex stared at the screen, his hands shaking. He had spent his entire life believing in the absolute power of the Council. Now he realized the truth. They were nothing. Nothing compared to what humanity had once been. Dravik swallowed, struggling to find his voice. We have to leave. We can't. The Valthos was caught in the human fleet's gravitational anchor. No escape. No chance to run. The screen flickered, and then a human face appeared. It was a hologram, a recording from the past. A man in a long military coat, his eyes cold and unforgiving, stared at them. An ancient human general. His voice was calm, emotionless. You are not the first to stand against us, and you will not be the last. The war was over, but humanity's vengeance had only begun. Humanity's return. The battle was over. What remained of the once mighty Galactic Council fleet was nothing more than floating wreckage, torn apart by a force they had never expected. What was left of their ships scattered in different directions, desperately trying to escape the impossible nightmare they had found themselves in. The Terran Defense Fleet didn't pursue them. They didn't have to. The survivors would spread the message, their fear infecting every corner of the galaxy. Humanity had returned. On the Valthos, Admiral Vortex stood frozen, unable to process what he had just witnessed. He had commanded fleets for decades. He had fought against pirate armadas, rebel factions, and even rival empires. But nothing had prepared him for this. He turned to Dravik, his voice barely a whisper. What have we awakened? Dravik didn't answer. He was too busy staring at the hologram of the human general. The man's gaze was haunting, like he was staring into their souls from across the void of time itself. The recording continued. This message is for those who thought they could erase us. You believed we were gone. You believed our history was a myth, our existence just an old legend. You were wrong. A silence fell over the bridge. No one dared to speak. Dravik felt his stomach tighten. The Galactic Council had never taken the stories of humanity seriously. They had treated them as nothing more than an ancient forgotten species wiped out by their own reckless wars. But now, it was clear. Humanity hadn't been destroyed. It had been waiting. The truth no one wanted to hear. A beeping noise snapped Dravik out of his trance. The ship's scanners were picking up something massive. At first, he thought it was more of the warships, but then his blood ran cold. It wasn't just a fleet anymore. It was a planetary structure, an artificial world hidden within the depths of the graveyard, rising from the shadows like a sleeping giant. The readings were off the charts. Admiral Vortex's voice was hoarse. What is that? Dravik's fingers danced over the console, running every analysis he could. His eyes widened as the data came in. This isn't a shipyard, he whispered. The entire crew held their breath. It's a war factory. The Galactic Council had always believed itself to be the greatest force in the universe, but what they had found here was a fully automated military complex, an entire self-sustaining war machine, left behind by humans thousands of years ago. And it was still active. Dravik's mind raced. This wasn't just about a single battle. This wasn't even about revenge. This was preparation. Humanity had built this place not just to fight a war, but to win a war that hadn't even happened yet. And now, after all these centuries, the war was about to begin. The message they couldn't ignore. A transmission flickered across the Valthos screen. It wasn't from the fleet. It wasn't from the war factory. It was coming from beyond, from the depths of space itself. Dravik's heart pounded. The message wasn't in any known Galactic Council language. It was old, raw, unfiltered. Then, the ship's AI finished the translation, and the words that appeared shook the entire crew to their core. Humanity has returned. The war for survival begins now. The galaxy will never be the same. The Valthos was released from the fleet's gravitational grip. A warning. A mercy. Dravik didn't waste a second. Get us out of here. Now. Admiral Vortek didn't argue. For the first time in his life, he didn't care about politics, didn't care about control, didn't care about pride. All he cared about was survival. The ship's engines roared to life as they engaged their jump drives, fleeing from the graveyard as fast as they could. But the truth was clear. No one could run from this. The message had been sent. The warning had been given. And soon, every empire in the galaxy would realize humanity was back. And this time, they weren't just fighting for revenge. They were fighting to take back what was theirs. The final battle begins. The Valthos tore through the black void of space, its engines burning at full power. Every system strained to its limits, the ship desperate to escape the graveyard that had become a nightmare given form. Admiral Vortek gripped the armrest of his chair so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Sweat dripped from his brow as he watched the sensors behind them. The ancient human fleet, the Terran Defense Fleet, had stopped its pursuit. They had let them go. But Vortek knew the truth. This wasn't mercy. This was a message. Every ship that had fled the battlefield would become a living warning to the rest of the galaxy. The survivors wouldn't need to be chased down. Fear would do the job for them. And that fear would spread like wildfire. The Galactic Council in chaos. The moment the Valthos jumped into Galactic Council space, alarms flared across every communication channel. Admiral Vortek, what is the meaning of this? The voice of Supreme Chancellor Elvora boomed through the comms, her normally calm demeanor shattered by rage and panic. Vortek, shaken and exhausted, could barely form the words. Chancellor, it's over. The council chambers fell silent. Dravik took a deep breath and spoke instead. The fleet, the human fleet, it has returned. Gasps erupted through the Galactic Council's leadership. Every holoscreen in the chamber flickered as sensor data and battle footage from the HSS Valor's Fist was broadcasted in real time. They saw it all, the unmatched precision, the impossible technology, the obliteration of entire warships with a single shot. They saw the last message humanity had left behind. The war for survival begins now. And in that moment, every leader in the galaxy realized a horrifying truth. Humanity wasn't a lost species. They were an enemy waiting to awaken. The Council's desperate response. The Council leaders erupted in chaos. Some demanded immediate retaliation. Others argued for diplomacy. The strongest voices, however, were filled with pure terror. Supreme Chancellor Elvora's voice shook with rage. We must act now. We will mobilize every fleet, every soldier. Dravik stepped forward, his voice colder than ever before. You don't understand, he interrupted. You still think this is a war we can fight. The room fell silent as Dravik continued. You don't get it, do you? This isn't an attack. He gestured toward the data screen, where the war factory was now coming online, its automated systems preparing the next wave of ships. This is a machine, an unstoppable machine of war. He turned to the Chancellor, his voice filled with something that had never been in it before. Fear. This war was already decided before it even started. The Terran fleet's next move. Back at the graveyard, the Terran Defense Fleet wasn't just reawakening. It was multiplying. The war factory, long thought dormant, was now operational. Machines forged new battleships at an unbelievable rate. Old wrecks were being repaired in real time, and battle AI systems were running millions of combat simulations per second. It was the greatest war machine the galaxy had ever seen, and it had only just begun. On the bridge of the HSS Valor's Fist, deep within the heart of the fleet, an ancient intelligence came online. A holographic figure materialized, a projection of a long-dead human admiral. His cold digital eyes scanned the void. Phase 1. Fleet activation. Complete. He turned, issuing the command to the entire Terran war network. Phase 2. Full mobilization. All Terran war assets. Prepare for expansion. The war factory's assembly lines roared to life. Drones worked like a swarm of locusts, rebuilding the fleet at an exponential rate. And then, the final order was given. Target: Galactic Council core worlds. Status: hostile. Objective: termination. The fleet began to move. The war wasn't coming. It was already here. The Council's last hope. Dravik sat alone in his quarters, staring at the hologram of the human fleet. He had spent his entire life studying history, fascinated by lost civilizations. Now he was witnessing the greatest lost civilization in history return from the dead. A species that had vanished not because they were weak, but because they had left something behind. A failsafe. A contingency plan so terrifying that the entire galaxy was now at its mercy. The war was no longer about politics, power, or conquest. It was about who would survive. And as he watched the HSS Valor's Fist lead the first strike against a major Galactic Council stronghold, Dravik finally understood. The only way to win this war was to find the last living humans. Because somewhere, hidden deep in the universe, they had to exist. And if there was any chance of survival, they would be the ones to stop this. The final transmission. As the first Terran warships entered hyperspace, a final transmission echoed through the galaxy. A warning. A promise. You laughed at our ruins. You mocked our graveyard. You erased our name from history. Now, we will erase you. The war had begun. And this time, humanity would not lose. The ultimate warning. The galaxy was burning. The Terran Defense Fleet had unleashed hell upon the stars, and no one had been ready for it. The first strikes were precise, merciless, and unstoppable. Entire Galactic Council military outposts, space stations, and planetary defense networks were wiped out in minutes. There were no drawn-out battles, no prolonged sieges, just destruction. The humans hadn't returned for diplomacy. They had returned to finish the war that had never ended. The fall of the core worlds. At the very heart of the Galactic Council, on the capital planet Varthos Prime, Supreme Chancellor Elvora stood in the Grand War Room. The chamber was filled with holograms displaying battlefronts across the galaxy, each one flashing the same dreaded color. Red. Lost. 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 A cold sweat dripped down her forehead. How is this possible? She whispered, barely able to comprehend the carnage unfolding before her. A general turned toward her, his voice shaking. Chancellor, we're losing entire fleets before they can even fire a shot. The humans, they're predicting our every move. Elvora's stomach twisted. No, not predicting. She exhaled sharply, realization dawning upon her. They already knew how to beat us before we even began. This war was never a fair fight. It had been over before the first battle had even started. A war machine without mercy. Across the stars, the Terran war machine expanded. Planets that had once mocked humanity now trembled in fear. The HSS Valor's Fist, acting as the command center of the fleet, had deployed an unstoppable swarm of mechanized warships, self-repairing, self-replicating, and equipped with weapons far beyond modern understanding. The Galactic Council's fleets were shattered. The survivors were given only one warning: surrender or be erased. Some races submitted, their leaders falling to their knees before the might of the returning human war fleet. Others resisted. They vanished within hours. The universe was learning a terrifying truth. Humanity hadn't just built a fleet. They had built an unstoppable force of vengeance. And now, it had no reason to stop. Dravik's desperate mission. Deep in the ruins of the Galactic Council, Dravik watched the destruction unfold. Planets reduced to ashes, empires brought to their knees, entire civilizations fleeing, their mighty warships nothing more than prey in the face of the unstoppable hunters. But he knew something the rest of the galaxy didn't. Something even worse than the war. The humans weren't acting out of revenge. They were following a program. Dravik had spent his life studying forgotten civilizations, decoding dead languages. He had seen this before, not with humanity, but with artificial war constructs. And now he understood. The Terran Defense Fleet was not commanded by living humans. It was following a preset directive, a fail-safe protocol built thousands of years ago. Humanity had been wiped out, but their war had continued. And unless someone stopped it, it would never end. Admiral. Dravik turned to Vortek, urgency in his voice. We have to find the last humans. Vortek stared at him, his expression one of disbelief. You think there are survivors? There has to be, Dravik insisted. If we don't find them, if we don't find a way to turn off this war machine. His words trailed off as a new transmission came through. A direct signal from the HSS Valor's Fist. A hologram flickered to life. The same human general from before, his eyes devoid of emotion, his expression empty. But this time, his message was different. The Galactic Council is no longer a threat. Initiating Phase 3. Galactic Purge. Dravik's breath caught in his throat. Phase 3. What? What is Phase 3? Vortek asked hesitantly. Dravik's fingers flew over the console, translating the ancient Terran database. His eyes widened in horror. He turned back to Vortek, his voice hoarse, filled with dread. This war, it was never just about the Galactic Council. The message finished translating. Phase 3 objective. Eliminate all non-human species. Reset the galaxy. Begin the new era. A deathly silence filled the room. The Terran fleet wasn't just reclaiming lost human territories. It wasn't just punishing those who had mocked them. It was wiping out everything that wasn't human. And no one was prepared for what came next. The last warning. As the final wave of Terran warships mobilized, a message was broadcast to every remaining civilization in the galaxy. A message written in a long-forgotten language, now translated for all to understand. A message that shook the entire universe to its core. You erased our history. You laughed at our ruins. You called us extinct. Now we are the storm that will erase you. Humanity has returned. And we are the end. The war was no longer about power. It was about who would survive the reckoning. And for the first time in recorded history, the galaxy had no answer. The final war had begun. The aftermath. The future of the galaxy. As the stars burned and civilizations crumbled, one question remained unanswered. Was there anyone left who could stop the Terran Defense Fleet? Was there any hope for the surviving species? Some whispered of a secret, a hidden colony, far beyond the known universe, where the last living humans still existed. A place where they had watched and waited. A place where the true heirs of humanity might still hold the power to end the war. But time was running out. The machines had no mercy. The purge had begun. And soon, there would be nothing left but the legacy of a species that had returned to claim its place as the rulers of the stars. Final transmission from the Galactic Council. A distress beacon flickered weakly in the darkness, its final message echoing through the void before falling silent forever. If there are any survivors out there, if anyone can still hear us, find them. Find the last humans. They are the only ones who can stop this. And then, there was nothing. The war machine had no need for messages, only for conquest, only for vengeance, only for the end of everything that was not human.